In this video, we're going to talk real quick about conclusions. Remember really quick that the conclusion mirrors the introduction in a lot of important ways, that while the intro ends with the main point or the most specific aspect of the entire piece of writing, the conclusion refers back to that. Do not copy and paste. Just re-emphasize or reiterate that thesis, let it funnel out and end with a release, right? The opposite of a hook, something the readers can walk away with and chew on, a lasting impression. When we were talking about introductions, I said don't start with a cliche. The cliche beginning for a conclusion is in conclusion. If you write that, just cross it out. It feels like you just kind of pulled it off of the shelf like clip art in a piece of design. Develop a transition that actually makes sense with the previous sentence. So look to that paragraph above, that final body paragraph. Think about what you just said and think about that big shift that you now have to make from some smaller aspect or subpoint right back to the larger whole main point of the entire argument. Like I said, don't copy and paste the thesis word for word. Just try rephrasing or emphasizing its importance. You don't have to copy and paste it because we already should know it. But now's the time to maybe state it in a more passionate way, in a way that reflects that we've moved through this argument together and now we have a shared feeling about the argument. In a similar way, you don't want to just summarize the main points. We already did that. Synthesize them. Dig into how we should now feel and respond to the argument. One hard and fast rule about conclusions is don't include any new points. And why is that? Well, because points need to be backed up by evidence and explanations, or in other words, information and explanations and analysis, or whatever words we're using. Another way to think of this is don't open up new cans of worms. It's okay to have us think about new things, but just question and critique whether or not those new things are actually requiring or demanding further elaboration if they live here. Now we have the same problem that we had with introduction paragraphs. How do I create a hook was what we questioned with intros, but with conclusions, we ask, what are some creative ways to actually have a takeaway or something for the readers to be released with or to chew on? I don't have as many tips for helping you create a release at the end as I did for a hook at the beginning, but here are just a couple. This one is my favorite. Parallel the introduction. So read back through the introduction after you've crafted something you feel excited about, something creative that you think will really draw the reader in, and pull out themes that you might want to return to. There's an example on this slide about an argument that is addressing corporate bottling of water and asking readers to not purchase bottled water. And some of the themes are the necessity of water to sustain life, and also our ability as Americans to be the ones who make a difference because we are a fortunate country. We have access to good quality drinking water. So you can parallel the introduction by referring back to those themes, reminding us of our position of privilege and agency to make a difference for those who cannot, or drawing back to those images of water as sustaining life, plants and animals, and how we would die without it. It's a necessity. And here's a chance to really think as well about the bigger picture. So what are the larger issues that our topic relates to? Maybe it's something as large as compassion or ideals of family, or what it means to be human. And as we get into the expansion activities, if you're working on a longer article, for instance, for English 102, you might put it together that I refer to those as mile questions. So they're the big, giant philosophical questions that your argument is tied to if we think about it deeply and for long enough. And sometimes it's a good idea to remind us of those broader things as we close out so that we see, oh, this argument or this piece of writing isn't just about this one advertisement. It's actually about advertising and manipulation and messaging and communication in general. And how we feel about this small thing says a lot about how we feel about the larger thing. Try this activity. Sit down, read your intro, your main point, your entire body section, and then write yourself a little prompt that says, so what? Who cares? What's the big deal? Why am I even writing about this? Why does it matter? And what will happen if my readers walk away from this and do nothing? And be very honest and free write. And you might discover that a theme or a tone emerges just from that honest reflection of your work. If you are finding as you do this that some of your answers are things like, well, it doesn't really matter that much, then that's a hurdle that you have to overcome in tone. So maybe you lighten up the mood a little bit and you acknowledge that, but then you wrestle with it and you tease it out in your conclusion section. Here are my final tips under the header, tone matters. The first is just be genuine or consistent. So don't overexert yourself. I was kind of just saying that if you're not uber serious throughout the body of the article, don't try to pour it on at the end unless that kind of a twist really does feel authentic. The second thing is be confident and do not apologize. The worst thing for me, well, one of them, is to get to the end of a really compelling argument that challenged me, maybe even caused me to wonder if what I believe about something is true. I'm not fully convinced, but it's opened up my mind. And then the writer says something to the effect of, but that's just my opinion. Or, to each their own. And that feels like backtracking. It makes me wonder why I had to be so invested in the middle. Now at the end, I'm off the hook. The third thing is end on a positive note, but only if appropriate. By positive note, I'm implying that readers enjoy hopeful, optimistic endings. They enjoy being inspired or encouraged to know that they can actually make a difference. Amp them up so that as they walk away from your argument, they feel like they own it now. That said, like I've written on this slide, there are times when that is very inappropriate and when your topic is just somber and urgent and not uplifting and requires you to go back to rule number 1 to be genuine and consistent with your tone. That is it for introductions, other than the always good advice, which is have somebody else look over it and tell you what their impressions are.